The moment my gynecologist's face went pale, I knew something was very wrong. She looked at me and whispered, "You need to know the truth about your husband." My heart froze, my hands started shaking, and a cold wave of dread rolled over me. I had always trusted him. I had loved him with everything I had. And now, everything I thought I knew was a lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But deep down, a small fire ignited a fire that whispered, "This is not the end." What she revealed next changed everything. My name is Melissa Carter, and I am 42 years old. I have lived most of my life believing that loyalty and hard work are what keep a family together. I have dedicated myself to my marriage, my home, and my small circle of friends who know me as the dependable one. Every morning I wake up before the sun, brew a strong cup of coffee, and go through the motions of life that feel both comforting and exhausting. But there is something I have learned the hard way. Appearances can be deceiving, and trust can be a dangerous thing to give freely. My husband, Daniel, is 38. To everyone outside our home, he is charming, witty, and successful. He has the kind of smile that makes people lean in, the laugh that fills a room, and the reputation of a devoted husband. But behind closed doors, the man I married has shadows in his eyes that I did not notice until recently. The small gestures, the late-night texts, the barely concealed sighs whenever I spoke about my day, all of these were whispers of a truth I was not yet ready to hear. I live in a quiet suburb, a street lined with oak trees whose leaves rustle softly in the wind, and houses that all seem to have perfectly manicured lawns. From the outside, our home looks like a safe haven. It's the white picket fence, the cozy living room with its warm lighting. It's the smell of coffee in the morning. It all suggests stability, warmth, and trust. But appearances, as I would learn, are often the perfect camouflage for secrets. Our marriage, on the surface, seemed normal. We have been together for 16 years. I thought I knew him better than anyone. I thought I understood the rhythm of our life together. I thought I had built a home filled with love and trust. And yet, there were cracks. Small, almost imperceptible cracks that I tried to ignore because I wanted to believe in the man I married. He would disappear for hours at a time without explanation. He laughed too loudly at his phone when I was in the same room. There were weekends when he would claim to have work obligations. And I would later notice the faint smell of perfume that was not mine lingering on his jacket. I remember the first time I confronted him, my heart racing and my hands trembling. I asked him, politely at first, and then with rising frustration, if something was going on. He smiled, that disarming smile that made everyone around him believe in his innocence, and told me I was imagining things. I began to question myself. Was I overreacting? Was I too paranoid? Was it possible that after all these years, I had simply become invisible to him in ways that I did not notice? The thoughts gnawed at me, restless and persistent, keeping me awake at night. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, tracing the patterns in the plaster and asking myself how someone I loved so completely could make me feel so uncertain. Then came the subtle signs that made my chest tighten with dread. A credit card statement with a charge I did not recognize. A screenshot of a text conversation that disappeared too quickly from his phone. The feeling that someone else was stepping into spaces that I had thought were sacred. Each clue, small as it seemed at the time, began to accumulate into a mounting tension that I could not shake. Something was off. Something was very wrong. I began to notice that our home, once a sanctuary, felt colder. The laughter that once filled our kitchen during weekend breakfasts had diminished. The warmth that I had worked so hard to cultivate seemed to evaporate in his presence. I felt an invisible weight pressing down on my chest whenever he walked into the room. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself I was tired or stressed, but deep down I knew that the unease I felt was not a product of my imagination. It was during one of my routine gynecological appointments that the first real shock hit. I had always trusted my doctor, Dr. Reynolds, and her office was a place of comfort and professionalism. That day, as I explained a minor concern, she paused, her brow furrowed, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my stomach drop. She told me there was something I needed to know, something that she had discovered and could not ignore. She asked me if I was sitting down. My pulse quickened. My hands, which had been steady moments ago, began to shake. I had no idea that the next few minutes would unravel everything I had believed about my life. I remember the sterile scent of the office, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the way the chair beneath me felt suddenly cold and unfamiliar. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. I could feel a tight knot forming in my stomach. I knew in that instant that the story of my life as I knew it was about to change. And yet I did not know how much it would change or how far the betrayal ran. The moment Dr. Reynolds leaned closer and spoke, I understood the magnitude of what she had discovered. My world tilted. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about Daniel, about our marriage, about myself, was suddenly in question. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flee. And yet a spark of something else flickered inside me, something dangerous, something that refused to let this betrayal go unanswered. From that moment on, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. I did not yet know how I would respond or what steps I would take. But one thing was certain. The truth had been revealed, and I could no longer turn away. If you have ever been betrayed, hit that like button and subscribe. This story is not just about heartbreak. It is about justice, revelation, and the moment the truth finally comes out. Stay with me, because what happens next is the kind of story you will not forget. After that appointment, I began to see Daniel in a completely different light. Every word he spoke, every gesture, every glance suddenly carried the weight of suspicion. I could not trust anything at face value. The man I had loved and built my life with for 16 years had layers I did not know existed. And every day those layers became more apparent, more suffocating. It started with the little things. Sudden text message from a name I did not recognize. He would jump at the sound of my phone, his eyes flickering with irritation when I asked who it was. I remember one evening sitting at the kitchen table, the dim light casting shadows across his face. I asked him calmly why he had been so secretive about his messages. He shrugged, leaning back in his chair, his smirk infuriating. "You are imagining things again," he said, his tone so smooth it made my blood boil. I knew he was lying, and yet, for a moment, I questioned my own sanity. Then came the late nights. I would wake up in the middle of the night, a vague unease gnawing at me, and hear him moving around the house, footsteps that were too light to be me, the soft click of the front door opening and closing. I would sit there in the darkness, heart hammering, listening, waiting. And every time he would slip back into bed before I confronted him, smiling as if nothing had happened. But I could feel it. The tension, the deception, the undeniable sense that something in our life was shifting, and I was powerless to stop. I started paying attention to his routines, the subtle inconsistencies that made my stomach twist with fear and anger. He would claim to be working late, yet the office lights were off when I passed by. He would say he was meeting a colleague, but the street outside our home remained quiet, deserted. And when I asked questions, he would deflect, redirect, charm me into silence. Every lie, every half-truth, built a wall between us. A wall I had not noticed until it was already blocking my view of reality. One evening, came home from work earlier than expected. I wanted to surprise him, to perhaps lighten the tension that had been growing for weeks. I walked through the door and immediately felt the weight in the air. The living room, normally warm and inviting, felt cold and tense. There was a faint perfume lingering, one that was not mine. My heart skipped a beat and a chill ran down my spine. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront him then and there. And yet, I waited. I observed. I noticed his reaction instantly. His eyes widened, just slightly. before he composed himself. He forced a smile, the kind that did not reach his eyes. "You are home early," he said, his voice carefully neutral. I nodded, forcing my own smile, but inside a storm was brewing. I wanted to demand answers, to tear apart the carefully constructed illusion of our life. But instead, I stayed silent, watching, learning. Every micro-expression, every hesitation became a clue in the puzzle I was piecing together. The more I observed, the more I realized that his manipulations were intentional. He thrived on keeping me off balance, questioning myself, doubting my instincts. It was a game, and for 16 years I had been playing without realizing it. And now, the rules had changed. I would no longer be the passive participant. I would watch, I would wait, and I would plan. Even at social gatherings, the tension followed him like a shadow. Friends would comment on how charming he was, how attentive he seemed. But I knew the truth behind that mask. I felt the cold detachment in his voice when he spoke to me in private, the subtle ways he minimized my opinions, my concerns. Every dismissive remark, every sarcastic joke at my expense, cut deeper than I let on. And yet, I could not let anyone see the rage simmering inside me. It had to stay hidden, buried beneath a facade of calm and composure. Then there were the arguments, quiet at first, escalating quickly. I would raise a concern and he would twist it, turn it into a reflection on my paranoia, my insecurities. I remember one night, standing in the dimly lit hallway, my voice shaking with anger, accusing him of lying. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said, "Melissa, you always make mountains out of molehills." I do not know why I even bother. I felt my hands curl into fists. My teeth ached from clenching. And in that moment, I realized he had underestimated me. He did not know how far I was willing to go to uncover the truth. There were nights when I could not sleep, pacing the bedroom, replaying every conversation, every look, every gesture. I began to notice patterns, to predict his lies before he even spoke them. And with each revelation, my resolve hardened. I knew that if I acted too soon, if I allowed my anger to show, he would find a way to escape accountability. I had to be strategic. I had to be patient. And yet the fear remained. The fear that I would uncover something so devastating that it would shatter not only my marriage, but my sense of self. Every day felt like walking on a knife's edge. Every interaction, a potential trigger for disaster. And still, I could not look away. I had to know. I had to see the full extent of his deception before I could decide how to respond. Each day, the tension built, layer upon layer, until it became almost unbearable. I could feel it in my chest, a constant pressure that would not relent. And through it all, Daniel continued to smile, to charm, to manipulate. He believed he was untouchable. He believed I would never see through his web of lies, and he was wrong. I was already watching. I was already planning. And the moment would come when all of his careful manipulations would crumble, leaving him exposed and powerless. The day I reached my breaking point began like any other. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window, a soft, persistent rhythm that seemed almost mocking. I tried to focus on making coffee, on brushing off the gnawing unease in my stomach, but I could not ignore it. Something had shifted. I could feel it in the air, heavy and suffocating, like the calm before a storm. Earlier that week, I'd returned to Dr. Reynolds' office, unable to shake the feeling that I was missing pieces of a puzzle I did not yet understand. She had asked me to come in again, her voice steady but serious, and I had obeyed without question. I remember walking into the sterile room, the smell of antiseptic filling my senses, the hum of the fluorescent lights above amplifying the tension in my chest. She looked at me with that same intensity she always had, but this time it was sharper, more urgent. "Melissa," she began, and the way she said my name made me stiffen. "I need you to understand exactly what I have found." There is more at play here than you realize." Her words were precise, deliberate, and I could feel the walls of my world starting to crack. I sat down, gripping the edge of the chair as if it were a lifeline, my pulse quickening with a mix of fear and anticipation. She showed me the results. Every word, every phrase hit like a hammer. There was no misinterpretation, no uncertainty. Daniel had been living a double life. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about his loyalty, was a carefully constructed lie. I felt a cold surge through my body, a mixture of disbelief, anger, betrayal that made my fingers tremble. I could not speak. The words lodged in my throat, wanted to scream, to shout, to tear apart the world that had allowed this to happen. My heart raced, my breathing became shallow, and I realized I had been blind for years. Blind to the small inconsistencies, blind to the subtle betrayals, blind to the signs that had been there all along. And now, I could no longer pretend. I could no longer ignore the truth. Driving home from the appointment, the rain-slicked streets reflected the chaos inside me. Every red light, every turn, every passing car felt like a metaphor for the life I thought I had, a life built on illusions, on lies, on half-truths, carefully hidden behind a charming smile. I kept replaying every memory, every argument, every fleeting moment when I had sensed something was wrong. It all added up, and the realization made my chest tighten with a fury I had never known. I walked into the house later that evening, the smell of rain and wet asphalt clinging to my coat. Daniel was there, smiling, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. He leaned against the counter, casual, confident, thinking he still held control. I wanted to confront him immediately, to demand answers, to see the guilt in his eyes. I knew that if I acted impulsively, I would lose the advantage I had gained. I had to be deliberate. I had to plan. I had to watch him falter without revealing that I knew that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I thought about the years we had shared, the sacrifices I had made, the trust I had given, so freely. I thought about the nights I had stayed awake, worrying about our future, about our children, about the stability of the life we had built. And now that trust had been shattered. My anger was a living thing, coiling inside me, feeding on every memory, every slight, every lie. I remembered the small things that had seemed insignificant before. The late-night messages, the perfume that was not mine, the glances he thought I would not notice. They were not accidents. They were part of the pattern, the elaborate facade he had constructed to deceive me. And in that moment, I understood that I was not powerless. I was not a victim without agency. I had knowledge. I had awareness. And knowledge is power. I could feel the fire building inside me, a determination that was both frightening and liberating. I was no longer willing to sit silently while he continued to manipulate, to deceive, to belittle me. I knew I had to act, but I also knew that I had to be smart. Every move I made had to be calculated. Every step had to lead to the inevitable reveal of the truth. And I would make sure that when that moment came, there would be no escaping the consequences. I started observing him more closely, analyzing his behaviors with a precision I had never applied before. Every gesture, every word, every glance became data. I took notes in my mind, cataloging inconsistencies, spotting patterns, identifying weaknesses. He thought he was untouchable, but he had underestimated the depth of my resolve. He did not realize that I had shifted from confusion to clarity, from fear to strategic focus. The breaking point was not a single moment, but a crescendo of realization, awareness, and fury. It was the moment I understood that the man I had loved, trusted, and shared my life with was capable of deception on a scale I had never imagined. And it was also the moment I recognized my own strength, my own capacity to confront, to challenge, and to reclaim control by the time I went to bed that night. The storm outside had intensified, mirroring the storm within me. The rain pounded. against the window, echoing the pounding of my heart. I lay there, eyes wide open, adrenaline coursing through me, knowing that everything had changed. God, Daniel's carefully constructed world was about to meet the force of truth, and I would be the one to deliver it. I did not rush into action. That was the first rule I set for myself. Rage makes people careless, and carelessness would give Daniel the chance to twist the truth again. I needed precision. I needed patience. I needed to become the calmest version of myself he had ever seen, even while my mind was on fire. I started with observation. Quiet, deliberate observation. I watched how he moved through our house, how he checked his phone when he thought I was not looking, how his shoulders stiffened. When certain names popped up on the screen, I memorized his routines, his habits, his weak moments. It was like studying a map before entering dangerous territory. Every detail mattered. At dinner, I spoke less and listened more. When he talked about work, I nodded, but I paid attention to what he avoided saying. When he claimed he was tired, I watched his eyes instead of his words. They were always too alert, too cautious, like someone guarding a secret. That alone told me how deeply trapped he was in his own deception. I began keeping quiet records. Nothing physical at first, just mental notes. Time, behavior, excuses, contradictions. I noticed how often his stories changed depending on who he was speaking to, how one version of his night was different from the one he told me, how his lies were smooth, practiced, almost elegant. That was when I realized this was not a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a lifestyle. The next step was proof. Not suspicion, not instinct. Proof. I waited for an opportunity, and it came on a Thursday evening when he left his phone charging in the living room and went to shower. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid he would hear it through the walls. My hands felt cold, almost numb. I stared at the device for several seconds, debating with myself. Once I crossed that line, there would be no turning back. I picked it up, the screen lit up. And for a moment, I simply stood there, breathing shallowly. Notifications stacked on the lock screen like silent accusations. Messages from names I did not recognize. One message preview was enough to make my stomach twist. It was affectionate, familiar, intimate. I opened the conversation. Every line felt like a slap. It's the way they spoke to each other. The promises, the inside jokes, the future plans. This was not casual. This was not accidental. This was a second life. I took screenshots with trembling fingers. Every conversation, every photo, every timestamp. I sent them to an email account I had created weeks earlier without even knowing why. Just following an instinct that told me I would need a place to store truth safely. When I put the phone back, my body felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I finally had evidence. Heavier because the reality was undeniable. But I was not done. Not even close. I needed to understand the full scope of his deception. How long? How many people knew? How many times he had stood in front of me and lied without hesitation? I continued watching. I let him believe his mask was still intact. I smiled when he smiled, nodded when he spoke. And inside, I was building a quiet storm. I began cross-checking his stories. When he said he was meeting a coworker, I checked social media. When he claimed overtime, I looked at his office calendar that he had once shared with me. Patterns emerged. Quickly, too quickly. One night I followed him, not recklessly, carefully, from a distance. My hands were steady on the steering wheel even though my heart was racing. I kept my headlights low, staying far enough back that he would never suspect. He parked outside a small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place couples go when they want privacy without isolation. I watched from across the street as a woman approached his car. She smiled at him the way I used to, with familiarity. With expectation, I did not need to see more to understand everything, but I watched anyway. Because truth is not gentle, and I needed to be strong enough to face it fully. I took photos, clear ones, nothing illegal, nothing intrusive. It's just proof of what he was choosing every day over honesty, over respect. Over me, I did not confront him when he came home. I did not even hint at what I knew. That silence was my power. He laughed, talked, he acted normal, okay? And I saw how fragile his confidence really was. The next step was preparation. I organized everything. Messages, dates, photos, notes, timelines. I created a complete narrative of his betrayal. One that could not be denied or manipulated. I was not building revenge out of chaos. I was building justice out of clarity. I also prepared myself emotionally. I rehearsed what I would say and what I would not say. I reminded myself that this was not about screaming. It was about exposing truth so clearly that denial would be impossible. There were moments when doubt tried to creep in. Moments when the years we had shared threatened to soften my resolve. But every time that happened, I returned to the screenshots. To the lies. To the calculated disrespect. And my focus sharpened again. I began laying the groundwork socially. Small comments, gentle questions. Quiet observations shared with people who would eventually need to know. Not accusations, just facts. Seeds of awareness planted carefully, so the truth would not feel sudden when it finally emerged. Daniel still believed he was in control. That was the most dangerous part for him. He thought I was unaware. He thought I was weak. He thought his performance was flawless. And every day he believed that. I grew stronger. I was no longer reacting. I was directing. This was not revenge. Driven by impulse. This was a reckoning designed with patience. Each step calculated. Each move intentional. Each silence strategic. The exposure was coming. Not loudly, not violently, but undeniably, and when it arrived, there would be nowhere for him to hide. The day of reckoning arrived like a storm I had been waiting for. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the wind rattled the windows of our house as if warning of the chaos about to unfold. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, but nothing could prepare me for the intensity of reality. Daniel came home as usual, smiling, confident, convinced that everything was still under his control. I met him in the living room, the air between us thick with anticipation. I held my phone in my hand, every screenshot, every photo, every message meticulously organized. I did not speak at first. I let him settle into the false sense of normalcy. I watched him, studied him. Every shift in his posture, every flicker of expression told me he still believed he was untouchable. "Melissa, you look tense," he said casually, sipping his drink. "Everything okay?" I smiled slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of calm conceal the fire inside me. "I am fine," I said, "but there are some things we need to talk about." My voice was steady, unwavering. His smile faltered slightly, a micro-expression too quick for most to notice. I did. I placed the phone on the coffee table and swiped to the first image. He saw it immediately. The corner of his eye twitched. I said, pointing, "Is your life outside of this house? The part of you thought I would never see." His confident facade wavered. He tried to smile, tried to charm, but his hands betrayed him, trembling slightly around the glass he held. "Melissa, I do not know what you are talking about," he said, voice tight. I tapped the phone. Screenshots appeared, messages, photos, timestamps. Each one a silent accusation, a testament to his betrayal. His breathing grew shallow. I could see the panic rising, the carefully maintained mask of control slipping. "This is not imagination," I said. "This is truth. Every lie, every excuse, every secret rendezvous. You thought I would never find out. But I did." He tried to interject, stammering, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I will not let you twist this. I have everything. And you are going to face it. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, and the rain hammering against the windows. I could see him shrinking under the weight of exposure, the arrogance that had defined him for years crumbling into fear. I pulled up the photos of him meeting the other woman, standing too close, laughing too intimately. I showed the messages, affectionate, secretive, deliberate. Every word was evidence, every image undeniable. He could no longer control the narrative. He could no longer gaslight me, could no longer hide behind charm and excuses. Tears formed. In his eyes, not regret, not shame, but fear. And I felt something I had not felt in years. Power. The power of truth. The satisfaction of justice delivered not with violence, but with clarity. I could see the realization hitting him like a physical blow. You thought you could manipulate me, hide from me, lie to me, I said, voice rising slightly with controlled intensity. But the truth always finds a way, and now you will have to face it. He sank into the couch, defeated, silent, the confident man I had known reduced to a trembling figure. I did not gloat. I did not yell. I let the evidence speak for itself, and in that silence, the full weight of his actions landed. The humiliation was complete, not because I forced it, but because he could not escape it. I felt a wave of release wash over me. Relief, validation, triumph, years of suspicion, fear, and frustration poured out of me in that moment. I realized that this was not just about exposing him. It was about reclaiming my own life, my own sense of self-worth. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer silent. I was in control. He looked at me, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, searching for a way to explain, to justify, to escape. But there was nothing left, no excuses, no lies, only truth. Standing stark and undeniable between us, I leaned back, letting the tension leave my body. The storm outside seemed to echo the one inside me, the rain pounding against the windows like applause. For the justice that had finally arrived. I breathed deeply, savoring the moment, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. Grounding me in the reality that I had survived and I had prevailed. Melissa, he started, voice weak, trembling. I do not want to hear it, I said softly, but firmly. Everything you have done is here. There is nothing left to say. You have lost the control you thought you had. And now, you have to live with the truth. For the first time in months, I felt peace. The rage that had driven me, sharpened me, had fulfilled its purpose. The power imbalance that had plagued our marriage was gone. I had proven, not just to him, but to myself, that I could confront deception and reclaim my life with dignity and precision. I looked at him one last time. The arrogance that had once made him untouchable was replaced with vulnerability, exposure, and a silent acknowledgement of his own failure. And I knew that no matter what came next, I had won, not through destruction, but through clarity. Not through anger, but through truth. I walked away from the coffee table, my body lighter, my mind clearer, the storm outside mirroring the storm inside that had finally passed. Daniel remained where he was, frozen, humiliated, stripped of the power he had abused for so long. And I realized in that moment that the sweetest revenge is not violence or cruelty. It is seeing the truth unfold and knowing that justice, silent and undeniable, has been served. I sank into the armchair across the room, letting the rain lull me into reflection, feeling the tension drain from my body, feeling the validation that comes from standing tall, facing betrayal, and emerging victorious. After the confrontation, the house felt different. The air seemed lighter, freer, as though the walls themselves had been holding their breath for years and finally exhaled. I walked through each room, noticing small details I had ignored before. The way sunlight fell across the living room carpet, the faint smell of rain still lingering on the windows. The quiet hum of life returning to a space that had been heavy with tension. It was strange how a single revelation could transform not just relationships, but the very atmosphere of a home. I thought about Daniel, sitting in stunned silence just hours ago. Stripped of the mask he had worn so carefully, he had believed. That deception could shield him. That charm and manipulation could keep me blind and compliant. I had lived in his shadow for years, questioning myself, doubting my instincts, and walking on eggshells. And yet karma, slow and precise, had found him. The universe had a way of balancing things. And I had witnessed it firsthand. The lessons I learned were not just about him, they were about me, about awareness, about patience, about the power of clarity and preparation. I realized that strength is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is silent. It is measured. It is strategic. It is knowing when to observe, when to wait, and when to act. My resolve had been forged in the fires of betrayal, and it was tempered now by understanding, self-respect, and the certainty that I could face anything without losing myself. I spent hours reflecting on the life we had shared. I thought about the years of devotion, the sacrifices I had made, and the trust I had given without question. At first, the weight of anger pressed down heavily, a familiar, suffocating pressure. But as I revisited the events, the deception, and the evidence, in my mind, the anger shifted. It became a tool, a lesson, a reminder that boundaries are essential, that silence can be as powerful as confrontation, and that truth, when handled with precision, can dismantle even the most carefully constructed lies. I thought about how many times I had doubted myself, wondered if I was imagining things, or questioned my own instincts. I realize now that those doubts were not weaknesses. They were signals, warnings that I had learned to decode. Every feeling of unease, every tiny clue I had noticed over the years had pointed toward reality. I had ignored them for comfort. I had hesitated because I wanted to believe in the man I loved. And now I understood that true love does not blind us to truth. True love respects honesty, transparency, and accountability. There were moments when sadness still touched me. The grief of realizing that the life I had imagined, the companionship I had trusted, was a facade. The ache of knowing that trust, once broken, leaves scars that linger. I allowed myself to feel it, to acknowledge it, because healing cannot occur without recognition of pain. And yet, even in sadness, I felt liberation. I was free from illusion, free from manipulation, free from the silent fear that had permeated our home for too long. I also reflected on the power of observation and patience. Revenge, I realized, is not simply a reaction to betrayal. It is a measured reclaiming of agency. It is holding someone accountable not through chaos or rage, but through clarity, strategy, and undeniable truth. The satisfaction of justice does not come from anger alone. It comes from seeing the consequences of deception unfold, from witnessing the balance restored, and from knowing that integrity and awareness are stronger than charm and lies. The experience forced me to confront the kind of person I wanted to be. I could have let anger consume me, allowed resentment to dictate my actions. But I chose to act with precision, with purpose, with focus. I reclaimed my power not by matching deception with deception, but by ensuring that truth became the ultimate agent of accountability. That is a lesson I carry forward now. Empowerment is not in reaction, but in deliberate action rooted in clarity and self-respect. I thought about the future, about what comes next. I will not allow fear or doubt to dictate my choices. I will honor the signals my instincts provide. I will protect my boundaries and respect my own voice. And I will remember that truth, once discovered and wielded wisely, has the power to transform lives. Most importantly, I thought about myself. I saw a woman who had endured uncertainty, who had faced betrayal, and who had emerged stronger. wiser and unshakable. I understood that the fire inside me, the rage that had once threatened to consume me, had been redirected into something constructive. It had sharpened my mind, clarified my instincts, and illuminated my own strength. I was no longer a passive observer of my life. I was its director, its architect, its protector. Looking back, I understand that betrayal as painful, as it is often reveals truths that would otherwise remain hidden. It tests character, endurance, and the capacity to act with intelligence. It teaches patience, self-respect, and the importance of discernment. And when it is faced with clarity, courage, and strategy, it can become a catalyst for empowerment, rather than destruction, as I sit in the quiet of our home. Listening to the rain that has finally softened outside, I feel a sense of closure. Not forgiveness, for that is not mine to give. Not reconciliation, for that is not possible. But understanding, clarity, and a profound sense of personal victory. The storm has passed, leaving behind not only a cleansed space, but a strengthened. I am ready for what comes next. I am no longer defined by deception or betrayal. I am defined by my ability to see clearly, to act deliberately, and to rise above the manipulation of others. I am stronger than I knew, and I am free. And that is the greatest lesson of all. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me about a time you faced betrayal and how you reclaimed your power. Subscribe for more real-life stories of courage, truth, and justice. And join me as we witness the strength of those who refuse to be silenced.